awesome. This feels like
I accidentally didn't hit the button that is the transition button for studios, so the intro video ended early. So those of you that are watching this on playback, I apologize that you see the ramblings that we are going on. But this is Indie RPG Hour. Indie RPG Hour is an offshoot of everything that we kind of do over at RPG Hour. This is specifically for grabbing people that make indie games, and we talk about anything from each other's indie games, someone else's indie game, or we talk about like a type of mechanic. And today we're going to be doing magic systems. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. I am RPG Hour, they, them pronouns.
John Austin.
Oh, all right. My name is Austin McKenzie. He, him pronouns. I am the lead designer, owner, financier, whatever. For Valorous Games, we made Valor, which is an anime-style D10 indie system that focuses on a lot of customizability and then screaming attack names at the table and getting mechanically rewarded for it.
I'm Andrew, he, him. I did all the Betamax cartridges, which the simple version is if you wanted like a nonsense, crazy gonzo game and you want a different genre, that's what my game does. I'm Halfling Caravan Games. You'll see like big, bright yellow theme, caravan on it, Art Deco stuff. That's me. You can find me everywhere under that. And yeah, I've like done magic systems and done D&D heartbreaker nonsense and crazy games that involve like mahjong tiles and dominoes and tarot cards because they sounded cool at the time.
Okay, so I see in chat somebody saying that somebody has background noise. I don't hear anything on my end. I don't know.
There was kind of a squealy thing there for a bit, but it seems like it might have eased up.
All right.
Yeah.
Unless it comes back. I cannot monitor with my phone. My phone is acting up. Normally, I monitor all of the background stuff with my phone, so that's why I sometimes look off to the side. So I do apologize to everybody if I look like literally over to the side over here because I have a TV over here that I'm using as a second monitor, and that is going to be where I go to for everything. For those of you that didn't catch our posts previously, Indie RPG Hour is literally here for us to build up each other and build up independent, topics and things like that. Try and promote good things among the indie TTRPG scene. Today is Magic Systems, and Magic Systems, because of the We Shall Not Name It system, because I don't want to... I already get enough heat off of the things I say. Because of that, because of the magic system there's a lot of people that do and don't like it. But the idea here is that if we were to mention something like that, we would try and focus on the positive. And the reason that I bring that up is because it kind of is the main system. Or not the main system, but the most popular system. Popular? I don't know.
Everyone knows it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Most used, I would say. I mean,
Yeah.
They own like 99% of the market, so that's the thing.
Yeah, and the ones that aren't them are the ones that wanted to be them or wanted to be old versions of them, and yeah.
So, I'm going to start off right quick with a quick description of what I like in Magic Systems. I am a big fan of high risk, high reward type magic systems. I actually do enjoy the fact that if I miss this, my arm could become a tentacle. I could receive fire damage. I actually like that. I think that can be. I think that can add to the story, and I like that random element that something is going to happen to me. I definitely like systems that can do that, but I also like them when they actually make the reward of it going off, like it's going to do something cool, and not all of them do that. Some of them are more about high risk, regular reward that do this. Um, and I think that trying to find that middle ground is where I really enjoy those systems. One example of it is a OSR game called DCC. They have what's called Mercurial Magic. I think that does it really well. Um, I don't know if you guys have encountered magic that's high risk, high reward. What you think about it?
As a broad thing, me personally, I want the magic system to feel like it belongs to the rest of the world that it's in. So if like magic is weird and unpredictable and kind of like its own crazy monstery entity thing, then I want the idea that if you play with magic, stuff could go great. Like the good, basically the good answer is nothing major goes wrong, right? Like if that's the world and the answer is nothing went bad, then great, right? Like I'm cool with that magic system in that world. But if we're playing with like a world that's meant to feel like that game, right? Like magic there is kind of just it's really processed, right? Like if you want to do a thing, you just kind of do the stuff and out comes the result, right? Like it's very not mechanized. It's like it's procedural, right? Like you do the procedure and out pops the result. There's not a lot of
You pick it off the list and it says what happens.
yeah. Like you pull it off the shelf and you do the thing and you get the result, right? And that's kind of how magic's set up in that. But if you've got a world which is like magic is weird and unpredictable, then yeah, I kind of want the idea that if I tried to cast a fireball, then maybe what happens is I get a fireball that would like wipe out half a village. But also at the same time, my arm is going to be like floppy jelly for the next 3 weeks because of it. Like, tuck it up. That's just the price of playing with magic. So, like, it's how the world works is a big chunk for how I want magic to work. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of a bit different. I tend to just because I play in settings and I build settings, coming more from that anime background where if magic is there, it's kind of a ubiquitous thing. I honestly I tend to follow the path that a lot of like the Japanese RPGs took, where I do find a baseline mana system that everybody uses to be really engaging. Just from the idea that the world is kind of inherently magical, and even your fighter is kind of pulling from that same resource. It might manifest as like them jumping over a building or using their sword to crush a mountain. But I like, for me, just the idea of magic systems that introduce a lot of that parity of it's a part of the world. Everyone uses it. It's the interest comes in how you use it and how it manifests for you personally. It's also a lot easier to balance, which is another fun thing, since I tend to run a bit more grid combat focused games in my design. I struggle a lot with kind of the broad disparity of like how powerful your magical effects can be versus what they might do to you. It's really rough for me to balance in a more grid tactical combat based system.
So I guess I do want to clarify one thing. When I say I like high risk, high reward, basically what I'm talking about is systems where if you fail, the bad thing happens. If you succeed, the good thing happens. Rather than sometimes these kind of systems have like a fizzle out situation, or where like you spend your spell points or your mana, and that's kind of it. I don't know if y'all have ever played. It's an older RPG. Another one that kind of does this as well is Dragon Quest, and I don't mean the video game. There was a company called SPI. I want to say 70s and 80s, and they were bought out by TSR eventually. TSR made a third edition. Third edition combined a lot of things into one book, and the previous books weren't that big in the first place. But Dragon Quest also had this. They had what was called the backfire table. And so if you failed, you'd roll on the backfire table. And sometimes it was as simple as like, oh, you lost some points to the magic has caused you to have this thing happen for 2 weeks to you, or
Yeah.
and so I mean I like that because of the fact that it can kind of be kind of up there in the the success can be really good as well. But actually, when you're speaking of anime, that's actually what drew me to the system, is because of how many animes have like these gonzo weird effects for when magic fails. And that's what really got me into it when I first played. Actually, the first one that introduced me to this sort of style, so to speak, is that it was Dragon Quest, and Dragon Quest had a very very specific way of doing things that was a lot of fun. I kind of still wish they were around and that it was a still like a going game, so that I could like point people to it and be like, look, because it could be hard to find. But
Yes, it's really funny in that they are the reason that we had Dragon Quest, the JRPG, as Dragon Warrior when it first came out in the US. Their hold on that title copyright made the venerable JRPG series Dragon Quest that's been going forever be Dragon Warrior up until they lost that copyright.
actually, it wasn't that they lost the copyright. They actually did approve for the company to use the name in the U.S.
All right.
It was just
They
basically.
probably got paid nice for it.
Yeah, I don't know how well, because they did end up going under, but basically they eventually, the law at the time was that there was no difference between print and basically if it was if it was a game, it was a game. So it was kind of one of those kind of deals. But as far as I have been made to understand from stories from early creators and early people that were around for things, is that they did give permission for things to be used. So I like that version.
Well, I mean,
I hope someone got a good payday off of that. That's my hope.
yeah. I mean, on the kind of like the magic is kind of like crazy and can go really well or really wrong. Like, and as this is going to sound kind of off tangent, but it's kind of on at the same time. Like, my wargaming experience was Warhammer Fantasy, and I loved orcs and gobos, right? Like, I had a crazy orc and gobo army, massive thing, ridiculous numbers of everything. Wag, right? And so the thing about the orc and goblin everything was that it either went psychotically good, right? Like, it was just, doesn't matter who's in front of you, you just roll across the table and goodbye everyone, or it was just, nah, you're gone, forget it, you just pack everything away, go away. And the magic system was like that too, right? So you had these kind of like moments where you would hit like an overpowered spell, and while everyone else would have, your spell can't be stopped or something like that, the goblin one was, hey, not only is the spell not being stopped, but you get to cast another one and it can't be stopped, and if you roll really well on that, then things just go nuts. And so like built into that, and then on the flip side is if you botch stuff, you rolled on a botch table and there was a non-zero chance that just that spellcaster would just and that was totally the price of playing around with Goblin Magic, was just every so often you have a spellcaster just go poof, because they rolled badly, and that's the deal that you get. And like that was really tied in with what orcs and goblins are, which is kind of why I love it for that, is because like just the idea that at least in Warhammer Fantasy, goblins are just a chaotic ball of energy. The whole orc and goblin army is just like soccer hooligan chaos. Roll it all into one place. The idea that their magic just kind of goes, yeah, or goodbye, thanks for coming. It felt great to do. I didn't love playing the system, and part of that is wargamers. Hey, wargamers, some of you are great, some of you not so much. But that magic system, like if I was going to make that kind of really unpredictable magic system, then yeah, I would be like lifting ideas out of stuff like Warhammer Fantasy, like the war game, because man, that stuff had some good like feel to it. I changed the mechanics, but like that idea that like if you hit a payday, it could really go your way. You could really mess up something or someone else's day just because the gods favor you right now. Feels kind of great, and I think if I was going to do that, I'm kind of talking and having head spin and design happen at the same time, right? Like the idea of like having to deal with a pantheon of really, really unpredictable gods, and then you just happen to get the favor of a few of them, and that could be great or that could be terrible, and you have no idea which way it's going to roll until the dice gods tell you, and have fun with that. It could make for a really interesting kind of gonzo sort of a game, which me, gonzo games, very much me.
The only time I ever encountered the Orc Magic, when I was attempting to play Warhammer Fantasy, the goblin blew up my general's head on the very first turn. I rolled crap for the morale check, and that was basically it.
That's it, right? Yeah.
I'm glad I spent all this money on these models for something like this.
Yeah, and I had another game which went completely the other way, where because of how it worked, I just had no answer for my opponent, and I'd lost the game before I put the stuff on the board. It's just we rolled dice to just get through the intervening 2 hours, right? It was, but that happened with that game, and I'm not knocking it for what it is. Like it did some stuff, but that magic system of just kind of like every so often everything really goes your day. Like I like that, but I want that to come with a world that says these guys are just unpredictable, right? There is no real good way you're going to know how things are going to go today, other than hit that button and see what pops out of the vending machine. Do you get like super magic mojo, or do you get wop 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 wop? Right, lots of sad trombone, like. But then like the other end, right? And as much as other people complain about it, my complaint is a mismatch. That whole kind of like mana point, psychic point system, right? And it turns up in that game in the very early editions, right? The stuff I don't like about it is that it doesn't fit with the rest of the magic. It's not that I don't like the system, right? Like I built a crazy triangular numbers fantasy heartbreaker magic system. We're talking like spellcasters with like 300 magic points, and a bottom low spell costs like 2 magic points, right? So I built those kinds of like systems to do certain stuff. But when one part of the world seems to say magic works like this, and then you've got this one other bit which just goes, no, it doesn't, sorry, haha. Like it bugs me badly. I want that bit gone and make it look like the other stuff. Or
I feel like that incongruity is just kind of part and parcel of the mainstream system, and that they try and be something to everybody. You know, they want to make sure that they capture the nostalgia. They want to capture the new players. It's honestly, it's an enviable position to be in. I say as one of the 3 people who enjoyed D&D 4, but it's. I feel like from a broader perspective, if you're designing a magic system, it's kind of that push-pull of like, how do you want to represent the world versus how do you want to represent how it works for the players, and that's something that I think a lot of designers really should do well to ask themselves as they're putting their system together. Just the like, how does this feel? And is this feel right for the game and the setting that I'm trying to make?
Yeah, because I think when we were kind of kicking around this, we were talking about like, what would an Ursula K. Le Guin magic system look like? And that's an interesting little thing, right? Because Ursula Le Guin, she wrote like speculative fiction that does not look like any of her peers, right? Because like with her peers, you've got guys like Heinlein, and you've got like all of these like big names of sci-fi, and then you've got Ursula K. Le Guin, who's in that little kind of transition spot between fantasy and science fiction, and it doesn't feel like those guys, which is great, right? Because I love it because it's not that stuff. But then how do you make an Ursula K. Le Guin world magic system work where you have to relate with everything, right? Like that's a design challenge. I like it. I don't know how I would design it yet, but it's certainly a thing. I auto-focused on stupid stuff.
Yeah, and that's it too, because like that's the challenge. It's not only does it need to feel right, but it needs to play right.
Yeah.
Designing a game is so much different from a narrative. I'm personally of the opinion that the Advancian system that is so popular, like I feel like it works really well narratively, since it gives you that narrative tension where you can kind of see the character as they expend their resources, but it doesn't necessarily feel right in the way it's been mechanized in the more popular systems, since it's kind of a famine up until you hit a certain level, and then you just kind of roll everything, and the limitations that are supposed to create tension aren't really limitations anymore, especially with how people tend to treat games as opposed to stories, where I'm out of resources, I guess we'll just sleep again. And
Yeah.
it makes the design encourages behaviors that are not conducive to the potential narrative payout that the system was originally conceived for, in more of a book narrative, and in more of a controlled situation where you can kind of guide the characters. So it's emblematic of that difficulty of, one, represent the system right, and two get player behavior to align.
And look, I've read some of the Jack Vance stuff, and I get where the Vance system comes from the Jack Vance novels, but then the way it turned up in D&D, it kind of seemed to forget one of the bits about the whole Jack Vance system, which is like, to a certain extent, magic kind of inhabited people. You had to kind of like download the spell into your brain, and then it kind of inhabited in there, and then later it would kind of like very literally just leave your head to go do its thing, right? Like, it was, you carried around a magic being in your head until you went, hey, fireball, and then boom, out goes the magic thing and does the magic. And so that kind of feel that you are quite literally downloading a being, in a way, into the back of your head, that's in that Jack Vance stuff. Just it's hard to mechanize that without. Yeah, it's kind of hard to mechanize that without kind of letting things go wild with what a very low-level spellcaster could possibly do, because, hey, what happens if you bump into the magic entity that grants wishes? Right? Like, you have the chance to download that and do a wish. Why? Because, well, you just found it, and it does cool stuff. So then you got things where the world is kind of like keeping stuff from you because you're not powerful enough, and that starts feeling stupid.
The earlier D&D books, I think particularly of the Dragonlance series, like they definitely, I feel like, captured, or at least strove to capture that feel, and they were pretty consistent about it. But again, that really works in a controlled narrative.
Yeah.
Your wizard player character, like what does that narrative aspect really do for them? Is it if it's fluff, eventually, it's gonna fall to the background as other things kind of come to mind and occupy the player's time, and that player may also just not really care about the fluff, which is certainly a thing that happens in that game.
Well, let's move
So,
away
yeah,
from that game.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's cool.
So, for anybody out there who's ever played Rollmaster, it's also called Chartmaster. One of the so a lot of people like to make fun of it, but I think that honestly, the way that they do magic is a very inventive thing that definitely makes you feel like you are progressing in your magical abilities in a way that I just don't get from other systems. And it's called spell lists, and it's not like what you're thinking. If you were to choose something like Thieving Law, which they have a magical thief, not exactly a class, but they have something called a Dabbler. You get Thieving Law, you can go each level that you put into it, you get a new spell, almost.
Yeah.
Once you hit 17th level, you don't get a new spell at 17th level, but it does make doing certain things on your other spells easier. So basically, as many points as you put into it is going to be the ability for you to do different kinds of things. And I think that is something that I'd like to see. Some of these spells aren't just, it's not always new spells. One of them is Find Buyer, and you get that at 4th level. At 8th level, you get Find Buyer 2. At 12th, you get Find Buyer 3. And at 16th, you get Find Buyer 4. You also get Find Owner. I really wish that we had more magical systems where, like, you saw the direct progression in the spells themselves, not just, hey, if you spend this many more points, or, you know, if you do this thing over here, you can add on this thing. I kind of like seeing more like a type of magic or a specific spell becoming more powerful in a more direct manner. I think that I'd like to see more of that. I think Rollmaster is kind of the easiest one to go to because this is the size of the book for all of the spells for this. This is Rollmaster Standard, and this is just for Magic. And also, yeah, it's old school, like where there's if this book falls apart, it's already 3-hole punched for you. So I actually wish that we would come back to that in all game design, is having it pre-hole punched, so that if your book falls apart, you can just put it in a binder. But I don't know. I think spell lists is a really fun way to kind of do things that I would like to see. I don't know if y'all have ever played in a spell list type system.
Now, are you? I just want to clarify because I'm not totally sure I'm getting it. So is it that the spells themselves just evolve into that level too, or is it that you can put more of your power into it to on the fly push it up a notch if you need it?
So in Rollmaster, you can do both. There is a way to push the spells and things like that. But the specific part that I'm talking about is just the individual list itself. So basically when you, I have it open up to something called Evil Essence, which is a style of magic, and then the spell list is called Darkness. And each level that you take, you can either get a new spell or a new version of a previous spell. And I kind of like that where, you know, if I were to take Darkness, I don't just get Darkness, I also get Night Vision. I get the ability to control the darkness. I can make shadow forms. I mean, there's just, you know, as you go, you get, like, the ability to control the idea of darkness itself becomes more powerful. And I'd kind of like to see something like that, especially kind of with elemental magic. I feel like sometimes it's just, it could do for some a little more geared towards this.
This kind of reminds me. I'm not like super familiar with the system because it was weird, but it kind of reminds me a bit of how older Mage from World of Darkness tended to go, where you kind of have that mastery over your chosen aspect or your chosen domain, and then you get better with it, and you can kind of do more with it. Or am I misunderstanding how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, as from what I remember, you kind of like keyed into spheres, and then you could either like bench the spheres, or you like you get the ability to glue more spheres together while you're doing stuff without it all going horribly wrong. From what I remember, I didn't. Mage wasn't
that sounds about right.
Played with, Mage wasn't something I played with heaps, but I
never played it. I just have some familiarity.
Yeah,
it was the most interesting World of Darkness aspects to me personally.
Yeah. No, I get the whole kind of like I would like a trick and I would like it to get better with time, right? So as I get better with the tricks type stuff. There's something a bit there. I'm currently trying to wrestle with building a magic system for a game that works very differently to all my others. It very much is my like gritty, crunchy thing. It is the least gonzo of all the games that I've made by a very long way. And maybe something like that would work. But I mean, there are some which kind of do like a keyword gluing type thing, right? And I've seen a few games where it's kind of like if you get this word that you've got and this other word and this other word, you can kind of paste them together, and that affects the risk, but it also lets you do stuff. So, for instance, if you've got like the magical time keyword and the cold keyword, then you could like freeze a person and make them slow down for a long period of time, or you could, you know, like hold an object out of time using the time bit, but then you could do something else with one of the other things. And as you get better at those, you can either glue them together in better ways, or you can unlock better effects out of each of those like magic word type things. And those can work for like element systems, like say your classic cliche kind of like Plato 4-element things, or like 5-element if you're going to include like heart, like Captain Planet, or you can go for like the Southeast Asian 5 elements, which have got metal wood.
That's East Asian, not Southeast. That's
okay.
more Chinese.
Yeah, China, but like I've seen versions of it appearing like most places where Taoism ends up turning up, which is kind of around. Yeah.
Speaking as a Vietnamese person, it's because the Chinese took it to us because they like to conquer us, and we didn't like that too much.
So yeah, like it's mostly like it's a thing that I know kind of turns up wherever Taoism turns up. So, but yeah, so like that 5-element things from Taoism, sort of idea, you know, that could easily work in where you just key things off of each one of those elements, and then as you progress, you can either like expand the element or expand the ways you can interact the elements with each other. I mean, it's almost like Magic the Gathering, right? Which does 5 elements keyed into things and then effects glue off them, and yeah. Like it could be an interesting design. I haven't seen heaps of them, but then hey, indie people are doing all sorts of stuff.
Well, they just announced that they are doing an Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I believe is going to be using Powered by the Apocalypse. So I'm very curious to see how they do that.
Okay.
I've had kind of that question since there is an anime I'm very personally fond of, and it's very popular, called Fullmetal Alchemist, where how would you mechanize that, right? Where they just kind of use what's around. So like, how would you turn that into a mechanic, but not, you know, slow the game down to a crawl, trying to calculate the amount of mercury and whatever.
Without shadow running the thing, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I actually think that something like that would benefit from either something like what Rollmaster does is a spell list where, you know, oh, I've got my spear, and, you know, at level 1 of my spear, I've got this, and at level 3, I can make multiple spears, or I can do them this way. I think something like that would be good. Otherwise, I think, personally, the way that I would build it would either be that, or I would build it in a super far opposite direction. And I would sort of mimic how Traveler does psionics, and you basically roll to see if... Oh, I wouldn't do this part, but in Traveler, you roll to see if you can use a certain style of psionics, and then you just have that form of psionics. So if you have clairvoyance, you can do anything that's clairvoyance-based.
Yeah. I mean, that's a bit like the magic-y stuff I threw in Betamax X. So Betamax X and Betamax Thulu have both got magic systems of a sort, but Betamax X is a bit more like that in the sense that basically if you pick up the I can do fire spell, then all that changes is what target number you need to hit and how many dice you need to hit it on. And the rules just say you can just do make fire stuff. With no effort, you can just like put a little bit of fire in your hands. So you could, you know, create a little light source and walk around with it, and then, you know, snuff it out when you want. But if you wanted to like throw a lump of fire at someone over there, that's just requires a higher skill level and more dice to be able to throw up the problem. If you wanted to blow up a building on the far side of like the room, right, like 200 meters away, I want to blow that room up with a giant fireball, then it's the same idea, right? Like what you're doing is you're just creating fire at a big distance with a big effect. So it's just more dice and a harder number to hit. And other than that, the system just goes, do whatever, right? Like you have the ability to make fire. Tell me how you want to make it, where you want to make it, and how gonzo you want to make it, and that's cool. So when I was doing a little playthrough with some people last year for one of the online conventions, there was an elf wizard going around with a baseball bat just pointing at things and just going, and just out of the end of the baseball bat just comes like flames, and people are like, what? What? Which, I mean, hey, gonzo nonsense, right? That's my jam. But the magic system just goes, if you can make fire, you can make your baseball bat flaming, or you could cause a ball of fire to just fly across and hit someone in the face, or you could melt a door. You just got to stand there for long enough and just pump fire at it until the door melts. Like, pick your options. And the same with like clairvoyance, and the same with like various other bits and pieces. It's just versions of how elaborate do you want this thing to be, because the more elaborate you want it, the more difficult it is to do. So if you're a person with not too many stats and not too many dice in this stuff, you're going to struggle. But if you've got a bunch of dice and you've got a bunch of stats, you could do all sorts of crazy stuff. Like one thing someone suggested was, can I use clairvoyance to look into another room that I have no way of seeing normally and then generate fire in it? And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, let's do that. Because sure, it'll be a big ball. You'll need a lunchbox of dice to get this thing to work, but cool. Yeah, so I like those sorts of systems where it's kind of like, here is a tool, tell me how you want to make it work, and then we'll figure out just how hard it is to get you to do what you want.
I really like that kind of focused abstraction where it's just like you pick the thing and then you're good at it, so you can kind of adjust to fit the situation. And I do agree that that's probably the easiest way to make a mechanic for that kind of elemental manipulation type thing. It's just when you get the question of like, okay, what if you want to start factoring in external factors like what's around you and all of that, and then it's like, well, how do you add that extra wrinkle in without slowing the game down or stopping the game?
Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to something that you were saying earlier. So one thing I would like to see more Magic systems do, and it's actually something like, it's not directly a part of character creation, but in a game that I'm writing, when you go to the Magic system, it's like, hold up, here's the secondary character creation that you need to go through since you created a Magic character. And it sounds bad, but it basically, I like systems that don't just say, hey, because you're doing this kind of spell, you have body gestures or hand gestures or gestures or components that you have to have. I'd like to see games more that let you pick, how are you casting? What are you casting with? I'd like to see kind of those things. And I actually built that into a system that's probably not going to see the light of day until I'm shooting right now for getting this out towards June. But the way that I built the Magic system is the first step is you choose how. And so just a couple of the options are, is it spoken casting, body gestures, hand gestures, components? And then you pick like, you actually don't have to have a focus. The document that I pulled up, I just realized I am writing an anime game based on a game that's not even out yet because I got to a point where I just like couldn't think developmentally anymore. And so I have a game. That game is definitely not going to come out soon. It's more of a like I'm throwing things at it because I wanted to see if I could write anime and it makes sense. So you don't have to have Athame focus, but if you have an Athame or imbued magical item, you can go anywhere from having a deck of tarot cards, playing cards, rings, an urn, a skull or bone of a previous magical caster. Like literally, are you casting because you're carrying around a magical artifact? Like, is this what you're doing? And you pick those. And I would like to see that more from Magic systems where it takes a moment and it's like, wait a second, how are you going to do magic?
So when you started with that secondary character creation thing, my brain went a whole different way to the way that you went, because my immediate thought was, you now have to make a magic something and it's a second character that you have. So, for instance, like, sure, you're a fire wizard. Why are you a fire wizard? Well, you encountered a fire demon and you made a deal with it. And you now need to make the fire demon that you have a deal with. And this is going to change how all sorts of stuff works for you, because you're stuck with, like, there's you, and then there's, like, Fireball McNasty here, who happens to ride around in your chest, maybe, right? Like, that's kind of where I was thinking you were heading, but then you just kind of went, magic artifact. Like, okay.
Interestingly, though, that concept you mentioned actually would apply very well for it's technically it's a JRPG, but like for purposes of discussion, so this is definitely an anime property, and that's the Persona series, where you have a character who awakens their inner self, and that inner self imbues them with power. Unless you are the main character, in which case you are the wild card, and you can just take whatever you want, and that gets. Well, I'm working on some kind of Persona demo rules, so that's definitely.
But also, ripping from anime, right? Like the immediate bit of anime that my brain jagged across to is Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. Him and the little fire demon, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No, I definitely had the Howl thought too. Yeah.
Right, like, and that's Howl's Moving Castle, right? Like this lines you up for a whole kind of world of magic that runs off a Howl's Moving Castle dynamic. Where
Calcifer, that was the name of the demon.
Yeah, was it? Yeah,
Calcifer, I think.
Calcifer. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
So Calcifer, right? So that idea that you make a deal with something like Calcifer, I mean, it doesn't explain necessarily the girl, although, because like the whole thing with Howl's Moving Castle is that, like, it's basically telling you that love is a kind of magic. Shoot me if you want, people on the internet.
The book is a lot more explicit about that.
Yeah, but it's kind of there, and I read way too much of that. Like, read into stories way too much. So the thing about Howl and Calcifer, right? So imagine now you've got a whole world where, yeah, sure, magic exists, but the way that magic exists is you have to sign up with something that has the magic. And what that is and how that will then affect you or demand from you, right? It's like the warlock concept in that game. But, like, it's the same deal, right? It's like Faustian bargain stuff is a great way to do magic users, right? You signed up with something, and it will want something in return at some point. And maybe it's bound itself to you too, right? So it's kind of stuck and you're kind of stuck and you're both stuck together, right? So how does that play out?
We actually figured that out for Valor. We've got a fun kind of it is what I will call our most popular flaw ever. So in kind of the way that Valor works conceptually is you can build whatever, and you customize and you level up your own needs. So what we did with the malevolent entity, kind of that deal with it. We'll let them finish up here. I don't want to.
We keep going. He just needs to, like, talk to cat or child or wife or something, right?
I got it. Okay, but yeah, so what we did with malevolent entity is you can take this flaw, and the malevolent entity starts at kind of a certain stat point, and every time you can, like, use a bit of its power to make things much more powerful or easier for you. But then it gets to make a roll to see if it takes over. And once you hit a certain threshold, it will take over. Yeah. And it will make things very complicated. And the fun thing too is even though the flaw itself is called malevolent entity, you can in like a more evil leaning party, for example, you can make it be like the malevolent entity is like this sweet paladin-y thing that loves puppies and needs to save everybody. So, you've got your, like, angry 100%. Dark paladin who needs to roll against this thing. Otherwise, they're gonna have to start, like, serving soup in the kitchen instead of doing whatever dark mass they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So I actually did that in this game as well. It's if you decide that the reason that you can cast magic is because of arcane batteries, and you choose a companion arcane battery. A companion arcane battery is any living entity that can speak to you that decides to lend you its ability to cast, so to speak. And you can use that to basically create a secondary character that exists using pretty much anything as long as it fits within the campaign that you're in. So yeah, no, it's called Arcane Batteries, and the example one that I have here is you have met a squirrel in the woods that speaks your language, and
Not magic.
and the squirrel actually contains very powerful magical abilities, but instead of using those abilities, it simply offers you the ability to use magic, and you can use its ultimate magic pool until it dies. So instead of having your own essence pool, you use their essence pool, which I use a pool of points to cast magic in the system. So you use their essence pool to cast magic. So if you run their essence pool down, because you don't have one because this is how you cast magic, then they can't cast magic to help you or save you because you ran it down. And since you chose this squirrel, they can't do anything but throw nuts or something that's not going to do anything but aggravate somebody. So,
I don't know. Like those things can carry diseases. I wouldn't want to get bit by a squirrel.
Well, with
Hey, I'm in Australia.
the disease rules in here, it would take so long for you unless the squirrel itself was a carrier of like one of the super deadly diseases, which during character creation, I do have an optional life path system, and one of them is that you have a companion that has a deadly, highly contagious disease that you're trying
Someone's gonna weaponize that. Like I'm guaranteeing you. You're gonna pull this out. Someone's gonna figure this combo out.
Plague wizard, right?
While you can technically do that, the base there's not a setting, so to speak, but the way that the game is built, it's built around the idea that the world is post civilization. There are new civilizations, but pretty much all the major runes and everything that you find around are forgotten civilizations from over even up to 1 million years ago, and as soon as 100,000 years ago. But none of those people are alive anymore. And so basically, like, new civilizations are like, hey, this city kind of likes us, so we're just going to, like, hunker down and build a kingdom here. And as long as nobody fails a magical attunement with, like, a major artifact when they're, like, taking over as the guide for it, then they don't accidentally release the spirit within, because all major magical items are created because of a heightened emotional experience, magical runes, and lots of things that you'll have to read the game to go into. And so creating a new major magical item is almost impossible. So you basically can cast magic, and you can have like a temporary magical item. And so you can end up in cities, though, that have these magical items, and the only way that they work is magical. So walking into them, you could be read by a magical item as having a major disease, and then you're going to end up with their version of the CDC or something coming down on you. So, I mean, technically, I have had a player try and weaponize it in one of the early play tests. I'm rewriting some things right now based on some stuff, but I had somebody try and weaponize it in an early game, and they decided to do it in a campaign where the players decided that the magical civilization, that the ruins that they found were actually for a ancient society that was focused in medicine. And so they ended up releasing a bunch of metal constructs that was basically like a militarized version of the CDC, trying to stop them from spreading the disease, even though nobody is alive in this kingdom anymore.
The hazmat golems came to play. Yeah,
hazmat. Well, I don't use the term golem.
Oh, that's fair.
Construct.
Quarantine robots.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still like, while it is technically post-civilization and post-magical and all that, like, it's still very much a fantasy-focused with magical technologies, rather than, like, there's no modern-day equivalent. Like, there's no cell phones and things like that. But yeah, no. So that has been tried. unfortunately they chose to play in a campaign that was the antithesis of that character. That character is the one that spearheaded it, so that they could find the cure for this. And they ended up spending 15 8-hour sessions, because this is back in the day when you could play in person and we would play for 6 to 8 hours. They spent 15 8-hour sessions running from the constructs, instead of trying to like they were blowing up parts of the city. They were finding magical items and trying to attune themselves to it to like heal their companion, while the companion was like still just a walking plague machine. So it wasn't until they actually finally talked to them and they were actually had the cure with them the entire time, that it was actually a very fun thing. But I digress. But Arcane Batteries.
That's a lot of time and sessions to find out that
120 hours to find it. Yeah,
chasing you have what you need.
Has penicillin, right?
I kept being like, "Do you want to stop and talk to them?" And they're like, "No, we will fight them." And so they go and like knock down a building onto them, and so they've got to dig themselves out of this building while the party is running around doing other things. And they
classic player character. Classic.
I will say that was during the days where consent-focused adversarial gaming was at play. So everybody came to the table and I said, "Do you want me to throw things at you until you die? Do you want me to throw things at you till it's very difficult? Or do you want to have, a more, improv, like, narrative focus, we all tell a story together type situation?" They're like, "Throw everything in the kitchen sink at us." And I was like, "Okay, we're going to do this." That's why the constructs were so aggressive, is because they wanted an adversarial thing rather than it being like a super helpful medical construct that they meet at the gate. It's the militarized version of the CDC coming down on them.
So instead of getting like
instead of Baymax, you get
instead of Baymax, you get like T3000, right? Like
yes.
Excuse me, but I will medicate you.
Instead of Baymax, you get Kill Switch Baymax.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, one of them was like, "We may have cures for you. Please stop. We need to And one of them had a they ended up destroying it like in the first session. But one of them had a magical air gun that was shooting, like trying to shoot them with the cure, and it kept missing because their ability to dodge was so high. They were literally the person that was contaminated, that had this plague in them. Their dodge was so high they were literally dodging these magical syringes flying at them, I will never get over the fact that like just the gonzo nature that ended up coming out. They wanted a serious campaign. It was there to be very serious, and it went gonzo in like 5 seconds of the meeting these constructs, and it stayed gonzo for I think we played a total of 45 sessions.
That's just RPGs in general, though. Like, everyone starts out with these grand intentions, and by the end, it's just Monty Python quotes and absurdity as far as the eye can see.
So like in the same thing, right? Like I played in a podcast when Steve D released his Relics game, right? Now, and Relics is basically angels and demons are real, and they've been hiding amongst humanity for a while, and it's all kicking off back again, and there's going to be a big angel demon war thing, right? So it's got that whole kind of like post-apocalypse, like that kind of impending apocalypse. Angels and demons live amongst humanity kind of idea, and you play angels in that. And when Steve was coming up with this idea, apparently he was expecting it to be very straight, and the idea was very straight. But unfortunately, he had me as a player and another person, Lois, as a player, and the pair of us just kind of went, okay, well, gloves off, then let's just do some random stuff. So we had like people talking with the goat, attempting to have like extended conversations with the goat, and my character who just kind of would just blag their way into stuff, and when things went bad would just go, well, look, hey, can't make an omelet without ruining a few eggs, right? Smash. But the magic system in that one's really kind of offbeat for others. So the way that all the characters advance in Relics is kind of different because basically you hit a point where you get stuck in the story. And so what Relics does is Relics goes, someone else, so not your character, but someone else's character has to say, hey, I remember when your guy was in this town doing this thing, and that's how you know how to get around the situation in front of you right now. So someone else has to give you the memory of where you were doing the thing. And so you get these magic powers also when you grab, like, if you're lucky on the tarot deck. So
is that a reincarnation thing? So like your character
no,
was in another life, or
no. So the idea basically is that yeah, you've always been an angel,
okay,
but because God kind of closed the doors and went off and got sick and tired of humanity and the world and just kind of locked the door and just went to snooze for a while. All the angels have kind of lost their powers.
Okay.
And you've just kind of like had them fade away, and you have no idea what you used to be able to do, right? You've got like a couple of things that you know you used to be able to do, but also you're terrible at developing memory, right? Like as a property of angels, you just don't develop memories well. And so the system then goes, like, for instance, my character needed to hotwire a car. So one of the characters said, yeah, I remember you in like the Eastern Bloc of Berlin in like 1965, and we were getting chased by someone because we were stealing something together, and you hotwired a car. You know how to hotwire cars. And at that point, then I hotwire the car. But then I can't, like, they can't then do that to me for a certain period of time. Like, there's rules about how you can do that stuff. But when you
that's a player character who triggers that, or that?
Yeah. So basically, when I hit a blockage in the story, another player character can then chime in and go, "No, your character can do that because." Da 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 da.
Oh, that's a cool mechanic. I like it.
So it's an interesting idea. And then the other one is that you can get these kind of like angel powers so when you create an angel, you check off the major arcana in a tarot deck, and one of them gets associated with your character, right? So for instance, you might have the Chariot as your thing. So if you're then drawing cards through the middle of the game while you're trying to do something and you flip over the Chariot, then you actually get a permanent supernatural power. And so my character was trying to do something. I've quite forgotten what it was at the time, what the actual action was. But then I turned over my tarot card right at the top, and that then meant that I developed telekinesis and could just suck keys from across a room into my hand, put them in a vehicle and drive off, which went through a wall and some other stuff because we were very responsible people. Very responsible. No buildings or people or anything damaged at all in any of our hijinks. Clearly not. But so that idea that like you uncover a power either randomly or because another character remembers you had it was an interesting way to handle the magic. And so like new arcane powers for those angels come about because of the current situation. So you develop a permanent power that fixes the problem right now is kind of the method in it. So yeah, or you overdo something. So again, if you wanted to grab a thing, like to reach over and grab a thing, and you turned over, you know, your tarot card, then you don't just like reach over and grab a thing. You get the ability to like suck a room full of these things in your hand, or like make the thing just turn up, or this or that, or something or other else. So yeah, there is a different way of it, like an advancing magic system type thing was just when you want to do a thing, every so often you accidentally do it way too well, and now you get to do it permanently, which was kind of cool.
And I just caught the time.
Oh, right.
We are actually out of time.
Okay.
I would definitely love to have you guys back to discuss magic systems again and or other things. And if you want to go ahead and plug where everybody can find y'all and the games that you make.
If you could read that backwards, that's me. Halfling Caravan Games on like all the things. Maybe if that's like not too blurry, you can just scan that with your phone. It's probably bad. But look, Halfling Caravan Games on Twitter, on Itch, on DTRPG, on all sorts of stuff. Search for that. You'll find me. It should be a big yellow logo with like a very fussy looking Art Nouveau kind of caravan thing on it. That's me.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm at valorousgames.com, VALOROUS, GAMES.com. You can also find me on Twitter at ValorAustin. And then, yeah, if you search Valorous Games, you should get us. We're trying to get better about doing the social media and the Twitter thing, and I still don't like it, but efforts are being made.
And this is Indie RPG Hour, which is a part of the RPG Hour Studios network of shows. This is just a gathering of different people from the indie RPG scene to try and talk positively about things. This is how the kind of magic systems that we like and the stuff that we are making and hope to see other people make too. RPGHourstudios.carrd.co is a list of links. You can get to our Discord. You can get to the podcast that way in the YouTube channel. And until the dice roll again.